Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jayarada Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jayarada Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're continuing with Canto 10, Chapter 24, and the text is 22. Sattvam rajas tama iti sthiti utpatti antab etava rajaso pajyate vishvam anyonyam vividham jagat. Sattvam rajas tama iti sthiti utpatti antahetavaha rajas sotpajyate vishvam anyonyam vividham jagat. Sattvam rajas tama iti sthiti utpatti antahetavaha rajas sotpajyate vishvam anyonyam vividham jagat. Please chant. Sattvam rajas tama iti sthiti utpatti antahetava rajas sotpajyate vishvam anyonyam vividham jagat. Sattvam rajas tama iti sthiti utpatti antahetava rajas sotpajyate vishvam anyonyam vividham jagat. So the word for word, sattvam, goodness, rajaha, passion, tamaha, and ignorance, iti, thus, sthiti, of maintenance, utpatti, creation, anta, and destruction, hetava, the causes, rajasa, by the mode of passion, utpajyate, is generated, vishvam, this universe, anyonyam, by a combination of male and female, vividham, becomes variegated, jagat, the world. So the translations by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada for text 22 is as follows. The causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the three modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe and through sexual combination causes it to become full of variety. Purport. Anticipating the possible objection that a livelihood based on cows certainly depends on Lord Indra, who supplies rain, Lord Krishna here introduces a mechanistic theory of existence known as atheistic Sankhya. The tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna referred to a doctrine already well known in human society. Gyanatimrandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamlam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutan Tanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataribhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimata Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimata Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Navishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare So this particular verse, the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, which we gather is Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu, who isn't with us anymore, but there's a statement made in the course of the purport, which reads like this: the tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. So I thought to look at this a little bit, particularly in the modern context. One of the fundamental principles of modern physics has been that the laws of nature can be described by very simple and general mathematical relationships. So the most famous advocate of this principle is Albert Einstein, who tried to find what's called a unified field theory, which would put all the forces that are working in the universe and all the laws of interaction of physics into one single unifying mathematical rule. So this is what he was striving for. It's called the unified field theory. So, of course, there have been others who followed on him and who have proceeded in that same direction, looking for this unified field theory. Because naturally, over time, different laws come to be understood regarding how nature's functioning. So those are put into mathematical equations. I mean, the most I remember is mass and velocity, and even then, you know, my memory is not perfect because physics is not my area, but so the attempt is to put down this ultimate reality underlying this phenomenal world into a mathematical equation. So that's the entire focus of modern physics. And such a theory, this kind of unified field theory, that everything can be distilled into one mathematical equation, which summarizes all the laws of nature, it would actually then provide a theoretical description of the origin of the universe. And particularly because the idea, the fundamental belief that's there is that the universe is coming from a primordial cosmic explosion. So this unified field theory, this one mathematical equation, it's also going to allow for, there's observed behavior of subatomic particles that are operating at very high energies, and so this theory would also take that into account. So this is the current view, and this tendency to look for exclusive causality to apparently just mechanistic functions that are going on. So the exclusive causality will be a mathematical equation. That's how it is. So it's a widely held belief that a complete physical theory has actually been established for phenomena that involve moderate mass, energies, and velocities. So I recall many years ago doing one course in physics only because I had a friend who wanted to become a marine biologist, and I thought, well, I'll do one course that she's doing so that we can at least go through our first year of university together in one class. So I did physics, which was not something I'd even done at school, so it was all very new to me, and I found it very interesting, but certainly not in tune with the particular abilities or outlook that I had. So there is this view, it's an established one, that there really is a complete physical theory for mass, energy, and velocity. So this falls into a category called the non-relativistic theory of quantum mechanics. And this particular theory that, looks at mass, velocity, and energy, it can actually account for all the phenomena of chemistry, with the underlying assumption that all phenomena of life can be reduced to chemistry. You have to have that fundamental assumption to be able to operate in this way. And the reason for this belief that life can be reduced to chemistry is that some time back there was calculation made of the hydrogen molecule and the helium atom using wave mechanics. So it was possible to give a theoretical explanation for the phenomena of atoms, solids, and molecules because of this ability to measure the movement of these two atoms, the hydrogen and the helium. And I'm drawing this that I'm recounting, I'm drawing from one of the devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement who was a scientist and who has written on this subject matter, Sadhaputta Prabhu. His books are Richard L. Thompson, and so I'm drawing from something of what he's explaining for somebody like myself that was not in the physics field. Now, because Lord Krishna here is bringing up this mechanistic view of the world, because naturally, being all-knowing, he understands there's this view of the world, everything reducible to a mathematical equation. He uses a different term for energy. So his term for energy and velocity is the mode of passion. So it means a way of being that's very passionate. So there's a great deal of movement and a lot of velocity. And in the commentary on this particular verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur sums up what Lord Krishna is stating with as though he's adhering, although that's not indicated fully because we know that that's not the case, but at least he's giving recognition to this mechanistic, quantum mechanistic theory of things. So Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur sums it up this way, that Lord Krishna is expressing, by the mode of passion, the universe is created. So he's not using the term energy, velocity, mass. He's saying the mode of passion, by the mode of passion, the universe is created. So this world, which is viewed as one being made up of facts, circumstances, and experiences. So that's what phenomenon means. There's some fact, there's some circumstance, and there's some experience. And all of those are apparent to the senses. And this can be scientifically described. So that's how the view of the world is. There's some fact, there's something you experience, and there's some circumstances going on. So, and then because you can perceive it with your senses, you can describe it scientifically. So you can use, mathematical formulae to describe the fact. The hydrogen atom moves in a particular way, the helium molecule moves in a particular way. There's some circumstance, and you experience that. Of course, you have to utilize some instruments because one's senses need a bit of enhancement, but at any rate, it can be perceived by the senses. There's that mechanistic view, and Lord Krishna gives acknowledgement to it when he expresses this mechanistic view as containing 24 elements. So he mentions this when he takes the incarnation of Lord Kapila Dev. So here's Shukadev Goswami saying, Shukadev Goswami is acknowledging that Lord Kapila Dev is presenting Sankhya philosophy. So in this verse, mention was made of atheistic Sankhya philosophy. So it means the mechanistic, the physics view of quantum mechanics and putting everything into the mathematical equation. But Lord Kapila Dev, he just mentions 24 elements. And Sukadev Goswami brings the Vaishnava perspective into things. So this is all contained in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Sukadev Goswami acknowledges how Lord Kapila Dev is bringing Sankhya philosophy. So we'll hear how he puts it. O my Lord, your name, form, and bodily features are expanded in countless forms. No one can determine exactly how many forms exist, yet you yourself in your incarnation as the learned scholar Kapila Dev have analyzed the cosmic manifestation as containing 24 elements. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam 8:18, 13th verse. If one is interested in Sankhya philosophy, by which one can enumerate the different truths, he must hear it from you. This is the Vaishnava perspective. Unfortunately, so Sukadev Goswami carries on, unfortunately, non-devotees simply count the different elements and remain ignorant of your actual form. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So you can see that the Vaishnava theistic perspective on things can be contrasted with the quantum physics mechanistic view, because there's acknowledgement that the explanation of the elements is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the source I'm going to be drawing from. And I'm going to offer respects for that knowledge that's being given. And I'm also going to understand that somebody who's not going to this source, this theistic source, and who isn't acknowledging the Supreme Personality of Godhead is merely counting the different elements. So notice, counting different elements, and we were understanding that the quantum mechanistic view of the world, it's actually putting things into equation, mathematical equations, so counting. So, a symbol represents a particular movement. A symbol represents a particular element. And then that's put into some sort of equation that then, which describes the circumstance, the way those two elements interact. One is lesser than the other, and then that will result in equals whatever. So, so what's highlighted in the theistic view is the fact that constant change and destruction is going on. So there's a recognition. So the quantum mechanistic view is there's observance, there's factual observance that the circumstance involves movement, change. And indeed, in the theistic view, there's the same recognition. There's change and destruction going on. And from the theistic point of view, our favorite source, we look to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here's how he puts it. Not in a mathematical equation form, but in a beautiful verse. So I'm going to read the verse. Bhuta grama sa evyam, bhutva bhutva praliyate, ratri agame vashaha partha, prabhovati ahat agame. So this is Bhagavad Gita 8:19. Again and again, this is the translation. When Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So notice, it's a very broad perspective of change and destruction. There's a moment at which everything's put into motion, and there's a moment where it's all put to an end. So a super broad picture. And the quantum mechanistic view is, sort of very subjective. It's seen the little things, but because there isn't acknowledgement of the source, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then everything has come about that somehow everything just sort of broke apart, and suddenly there was movement. Suddenly there was, this velocity. Suddenly there was circumstances happening with atoms moving at high energies, and this is how the world is getting formed. It's merely mechanistic. So the argument for the futility of the scientist's work, and this is the argument from the Vaishnava perspective, taking into account the broad view that Lord Krishna is giving, that the laws of nature go on without regard for the scientist's work. So there isn't control. That's what the point is. There isn't control of that mass, that velocity. I mean, in some lab, one may attempt to manipulate things, but the laws of nature go on regardless whether it's been put into a mathematical equation or not. It means there isn't control over how the elements are proceeding, how these energies are working. So currently, biochemists hold the belief that characteristics of living beings, such as memory and hearing, they're going to be understood by the coordinative interaction between small and large molecules. So you can understand memory, and you can understand how hearing happens just by analyzing how molecules are moving. So biochemists hold this view. And again, it rests on the assumption that life is a quantum mechanical phenomenon. So there's some fact, there's some circumstance, it can be observed by the senses. So an example of this is that at any time a physical system is described, there's a positive coordinate called Q, Qj, and there's a momentum coordinate, which is Pj. These coordinates comprise the numbers for a system of n material particles, and two equations describe how these numbers change with the passage of time. So there's an actual equation. So this is how it's made up. I'll read it again. So you want to describe a physical system with a quantum mechanistic view, then there's got to be a coordinate, this versus that. So what is usually looked at, there's a position coordinate. So something's in one spot. It's called the QJ, and there's a momentum coordinate, what's going to cause movement for that particular physical something. And that momentum is PJ. This is the symbols that are used. These coordinates comprise numbers, n, for a system. And so, you see it when, most of us have gone through school with an axis. There's the up and the cross kind of axis. So the scientists do it in terms of position, coordinate, and momentum. So position's going to change with momentum. So they graph that. And so then material particles start moving. So they're looking at that, how some physical thing is affected by momentum and how the movement happens. So that's what they're graphing. And because time is going to affect things. So movement is inevitable because of time. Now, this theory rests with Isaac Newton. And in the 18th century, so now it's 200 years ago, this is how Isaac Newton put it. I suspect that the phenomenon of nature may also depend upon something certain by which the particle of bodies are either naturally impelled towards one another and cohere in regular figures, or are repelled and recede from one another. So this is how he puts it. Some particles in some physical system are going to be repelled that way. Some are going to be attracted and they're going to adhere. So this is how energies move and function with the passage of time. So there's the theory still held today, 200 years ago. Lord Krishna is touching on the mechanistic view, but again, he's calling it the mode of passion. So the energy, he's referring to the energy that's bringing about movement. So the physicality of the whole thing, he touches on in a different way, but at least he's pointing to the movement. And so the study of natural laws without knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead is study without knowing the background of nature. It's merely observation, what's right in front of you, but you're missing what's behind. And there's this attempt, as I mentioned in the beginning, to actually try and put all these laws that have been found of, when there's this mass and there's this movement, then it results in this. So there's many, many little laws that have been formulated in physics. So there's an attempt to put all those laws together and try and create one equation that says something about the background reality. Now, what set it all off? This energy that allowed for this movement to happen over time. But there's not acknowledgement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because it's not a theistic view. So somehow there must be something mechanical that set off everything. So there's still looking for some origin of things, but without acknowledging, the presence of a Supreme Person who's behind everything. So we can say from the theistic perspective, that the Lord of all, the controller of nature, whose every wish is fulfilled because personality has desires, he first glances, it's his glance upon material nature which sets everything into motion. So he doesn't actually even have to physically bring about the movement or physically do something. It's his energy which activates. So this is what the quantum mechanistic view is observing energy and high velocities, but it's not acknowledging that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's merely his glance which sets off all the energy. I mean, it's a very far-out concept to see a Supreme Person having such incredible intelligence and this capacity to set everything in motion. So, and Krishna puts it this way himself: by my glance, which considers the jiva's positions according to previous karma, this universe appears again and again. So here's the exact verse in Bhagavad Gita 9 and 10. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction. He states it very clearly. O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving living beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created, annihilated again and again. Thus, the Supreme Lord is the supreme will and the background of material manifestation. But the management is being done by material nature. So that particular verse from Bhagavad Gita 9:10, Mataji Kshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetutanena kunteya jagat viparivartate. Yeah. So this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, clearly stated by Lord Krishna. And here, Lord Krishna is presenting to Nanda Maharaj, the mode of passion creates this universe and through sexual combination causes it to become full of variety. So, from the quantum mechanical point of view, there's a scientist called van Helmholtz in the 19th century who expressed the following view. The task of physical science is to reduce all phenomena of nature to forces of attraction and repulsion, the intensity of which is dependent upon the mutual distance of material bodies. So it sounds logical, because the quantum mechanistic view, remember, it's observing that from 200 years ago, the theory is that atoms either get attracted to one another and adhere, or else they get repelled from one another. So on the subatomic level, that's what's going on. And here, van Helmholtz, he's saying that the purpose of physical science is to reduce everything that's happening in nature to these forces of attraction and repulsion. That's everything that's going on. Atoms, molecules, they're either attracted or they're repulsed from one another. But Krishna's using this particular terminology, the mode of passion. So the energy that's there, that's getting everything in motion, is coming from him, and then material nature is managing that energy. Means material nature will decide what comes together or what comes apart. So particularly Lord Krishna is referring to, like on a sort of more gross scale where you can observe this, is that there's sexual combination that causes everything to become full of variety. So, meaning the interaction between male and female in all species of life then increases the variety. So the energy is working through reproduction. Yeah. Um, and here's Lord Krishna, who characterizes the mode of passion. So these are his words. The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti, and because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive action. So the energy that scientists are trying to break down on a subatomic level, it's actually stemming from desires and longings on the part of living beings, which is interesting. It's because you see the theistic view is consciousness, and consciousness being the impelling force that drives the living entity. But from the mechanistic point of view, it's merely this kind of detached observation of, oh, some things are getting repelled, some things are getting attracted. Let's put it down in a mathematical equation. It's a very different view. It's not taken into account the origin being from a supreme person, and that consciousness is part of the picture, and will is part of the picture, and desire is part of the picture, all coming from the supreme personality of Godhead. So it's a very different, well, mechanistic is the best view. I mean, the best way to express that view. And Srila Prabhupada gives a commentary that highlights the definition of the mode of passion. He says, woman has attraction for man and man has attraction for woman. And when the mode of passion is increased, one develops the hankering for material enjoyment. So the coming together, like the scientists put it, you know, the attraction of molecules, so the coming together of male and female energy, then it actually increases the desire for enjoyment, because from a theistic point of view, there's always the view that there's consciousness and desire, and this is what's impelling movement and energy. So then, this is Srila Prabhupada, one has to work hard to get the products of the mode of passion, and one becomes bound by such activities. So the whole material world, Srila Prabhupada generalizes, is more or less in the mode of passion, and that's what we're hearing here from Lord Krishna. It's the mode of passion, the energy of this way of being, of just being impelled by desires and longings. That's the way that material nature is managing itself, so to speak. So I've tried to look at this from at least contrasting the quantum mechanistic view of things and the theistic view of things as related to material nature. So if there's any thought on this matter.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for your class. You made a lot of wonderful points. You mentioned the word set off, I believe the phrase set off, and what causes, what's the background that sets off these different movements. As soon as you mentioned that, it reminded me of a mundane movie that came out in the 90s. It was with actresses Queen Latifah, Jada Pinkett. There was a movie called Set It Off. And it's a long story, but basically the gist of the story is that all these women were struggling and paying their bills. So they decided to come together. It was more than two women, but I don't remember their names. But so they decided to come together and rob a bank. And so that's what set it off, their poverty. And so we see what set this Govardhan pastime off. If Indra was humble, there would be no Govardhan pastime, it wouldn't be so exciting. But what set it off is his pride. And we see that, so basically you were talking about this verse and talks about the mode of goodness, and there's a nice verse that's in the 11th canto, chapter 25, verse 9. It says, those predominantly in the mode of goodness are self-controlled. Those in passions, kind of related to this verse, are lusty, and those who are in the mode of ignorance become angry. Now, the one thing that I really love about this verse is that it says it equates self-control with the good person. if you're a good person, that means you're self-control. However, we see in this Govardhan Lila pastime, and we could probably relate to our own lives, is that anyone can be a good person when they're honored. Try being a good person when someone else is honored. And we see this in Indra's pastime. And so anyone can also be a good person when others have to hear them speak. Try being a good person when you have to hear others speak. And so we see this, which sets off different things in the pastimes as described in the Bhagavatam. And I'll just mention one thing, one couple of analogies I heard. Actually, it's the same analogies explained in different ways that I really love. It describes how we can maintain, how can we could be self-controlled and a good person in all circumstances of life. So there's a quote that says, people should live in the world, but not be filled with it. A ship lives in the water, but if the water gets into the ship, she goes down to the bottom. So people may live in the world, but if the world gets into them, they sink. And there's another quote that says, ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. We can't stop everything on the outside, opposition, criticism, rumors, or traffic. But if we allow what's on the outside to get on the inside, then we'll sink into depression, fear, and anger. And this is one of the reasons I love the story of Noah's Ark, because God went to Noah. He says, my dear Noah, you have a mess. There's a flood coming. Here's the message. Build a ship so you and your family will survive. So Krishna tells us the same thing in the Gita. We may or may not listen, but he tells us the same thing. You have a mess. There's a flood of difficulties coming. Here's the message. Build character so that your bhakti will survive. Samsara sindhum ati dushtanamo titishor nanya plavo bhagavata purushottamasa lila kata rasini shevanam antarena. This verse from the 12th canto, chapter 4, verse 40, I believe, it says, if you want to cross the ocean, samsara sindhu, you have to build a boat. Nanya plava means boat. So what is this boat composed of? Lila kata rasini shevanam, the nectarian pastimes of Krishna. Why are we discussing Krishna's pastimes and the good qualities? So we won't allow what's on the outside to get on the inside. So my question is related to this analogy. We see that any ship that's built, when it goes on various voyages, there's a person called the inspector to see whether you're actually properly maintaining your ship. Because if you're not properly maintaining your ship, any hole in your ship, the ship will eventually sink. So there's always inspectors to come. And so we see that the Lord does the same thing. If there's any hole in our character, he'll reveal it like Indra. And we see, so my question is, I can speak for my own life, is that I see, throughout my life, and probably because I wasn't coming to Bhagavatam, probably because I didn't care about what devotees say. I was committing an offense and saying, this class is so boring. Why should I waste my time coming to Bhagavatam class? And I realized that's why I'm disturbed, but like Indra, over the most petty little things. So how do we know we've built our character, we built our ship, we're chanting the holy name, but we see that devotees still, like Indra, sink over the most petty things. It's not even a real obstacle. Somebody's getting more honor than me. How about deal with death or the death of a family? That's a real obstacle. But how do we know that, or how can we realize that whether or not we have holes in our character? And I don't know if my question was clear, but sometimes we imagine, I would say the answer is because we're always disturbed by the most petty things. But let's say we don't realize that. What are some steps we could do to realize I'm actually being, my consciousness is sinking over the most petty things?
So your question has to do with becoming cognizant of the fact that one's consciousness has got affected by things that are capsizing one's being, and yet they're such little things. All right. So, well, the secret to staying on a steady course, sailing smoothly on calm waters is to at least be striving to be in the mode of goodness. And I mean, we're following a philosophy that is putting an emphasis on transcendence, even going beyond mode of goodness. But the rule aspect of transcendent philosophy is mode of goodness. So that steady course, that, nice intact ship that's sailing smoothly, it's assisted by the rules that go along with practicing transcendental life. So those rules, some are, very visible, and some one has to think about more deeply. So the more deeper ones are the ones you brought up, the ones that pertain to having equanimity is the term used in Bhagavad Gita, the not capsizing part, has to do with how one deals with those subtle things that you were highlighting. It appears that somebody's dishonoring one, particularly that one. I mean, particularly you put an emphasis on that one. Or it appears that somebody is casting a poor light on our character. Or maybe even fabricating something that would put our character in question. So these are the three things you were highlighting that, could shake one's smooth sailing. Even if one's following the gross rules, perhaps, trying to live a regulated life, perform certain transcendental activities to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead at specific times of the day, the regular external rules. So, but we're looking at these subtle aspects that can cause the capsizing. So, so how to actually tackle one's character being put into a bad light, one in fact being dishonored. So we're living in the mode of passion. This class was highlighting, Lord Krishna was highlighting that, frankly speaking, this world's in the mode of passion. So the mode of passion is a person needs to get something they want, because everything's coming from desire and longing. That's what sets off, that's the velocity in everything. The scientists talk about it on a subatomic level, on a gross level. It's the same thing. There's some desire that impels movement. So that desire, because desire, if it's not in the mode of goodness, is self-centered. It means that around one in this world that's operating in the mode of passion, persons are operating looking to fulfill their desires. So if you're operating in the mode of passion, to fulfill your desire, you may step on the head of others. You may play dirty, and even to get what you want, put somebody else in a very compromised position. In order to preserve your self-image, you may actually harm the image of somebody else. Because mode of passion, the focus is on getting what you want. So this is very common. This is how this world is operating. It's not in the mode of goodness. In the current time we're living in, it's a mode of passion. So here is one confronted with this. And you looking at what you highlighted, one's mind is getting agitated, and, how do you keep on your course? Your question was, how do you recognize? Well, of course you recognize that you're getting agitated, like something's not in place. You're even recognizing, my character's under attack, I'm being dishonored in some way, poorly treated. So how are you going to navigate that? So the secret, without a doubt, is being extremely rational and logical. That's mode of goodness. One is imbued with intelligence. With transcendental activity, there's spiritual intelligence. So you look from that perspective. So even if something, one's thrown off balance, one looks at what is being presented here. And one uses one's intelligence and approaches it in a rational manner. What else is one to do? It appears that you need this particular thing. I need to point out to you that if you need that particular thing, I happen to be standing here. I can actually assist you in this way, but not in that way. Whatever it is, very rational. And that is the mode of goodness. So if one goes into the space of, a calamity has struck me, I'm being hurt in these kind of ways, then that's sliding into the mode of ignorance, where you're just like bewailing the fact that, you've been mistreated. Not a good space to stay in, and why? Krishna's kindly given one intelligence. Krishna's kindly given one the capacity to reason. One may have to sharpen it, but one approaches things rationally and reasonably. And sometimes it involves drawing a boundary with somebody, where somebody's, about to take their huge boot and put it on top of your head. One can actually say, right now, I choose to step out of the way. You may bring your boot crashing down, but crash it down on the floor, not on my head. So one can actually draw a boundary, and also one can rationally preserve oneself, very rationally. With some persons, one may not actually speak about the agitation that's been caused because the relationship's not there, but one can at least look at what action is being performed that's not in order, and how to actually negotiate the space so that one can continue sailing smoothly and not capsize. So not capsizing often involves sometimes stepping out of the way, because that's the only course of action. Let the person capsize themselves, not take you down with them. Or it involves actually speaking. Like, if you perform this particular action, well and good. I don't wish to be part of that action. If you are drawing me into that picture, kindly take me out of the picture, because I choose not to be a participant in that. They're free to do as they wish, but you've let them know you're not part of that picture. Mode of goodness. You can carry on sailing smoothly. They're going to capsize, they're not going to capsize you at the same time, and you're choosing not to capsize yourself. I've tried to draw it in, the language that you utilized, but that is staying in the mode of goodness.
Thank you for your answer. Very beautiful and poetic. I'm gonna have to look at your first statement when you mentioned it. So it was very beautiful and poetic, using the same analogy, and I'm expanding on that. Regarding the point of drawing boundaries you were mentioning, it brought to mind another point. Maybe you could just share this last point. Because it appears that sometimes people are setting them up for failure. Like you said, we go in a mode of goodness. We let somebody know, please don't put me in this scenario. I'm just going to respectfully be honest with you, and I'm going to let you know. And usually people like to annoy others. Oh, this is your pet peeve. Let me annoy you even more. I'm going to even do it, increase it and do it. And so it appears that sometimes when you let people know, that's kind of a setup for failure. And when you set boundaries, but as far as setting boundaries is concerned, my real direction I'm going is that we see we all have our whether our conceptions are wrong or right, it doesn't matter, but we all have our conceptions of good association and bad association. I'm going to set my boundaries. I'm not going to associate in this with these persons, places, things, circumstances. I set my boundaries. However, we see many things in the Bhagavatam. I'll just use one thing: Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu, he set his boundary. He had a notion of who's better association. Who's better association? Lord Vishnu and the Vaishnavas. So he asked his father, my dear son, Hiranyakashipu had his son, my dear son, what's the greatest association in his world? Lord Vishnu and the Vaishnavas. And so Hiranyakashipu, he didn't associate with Vishnu and the Vaishnavas on the outside, but we see that as soon as Prahlad glorified them, he was associating with Vishnu and the Vaishnavas on the inside. So we see that what is the use of being physically separated from someone if we're not mentally separated from someone? We don't draw that mental boundary. And so we see that as soon as somebody... So how do we... I would say generally speaking from the lessons, I can mention some pastimes, but I would say usually Krishna won't allow us to set those internal boundaries if we're committing aparadhs unprovoked, secretly. And so then we may wonder why, I'll just mention one pastime in regards. Lord Chaitanya, he didn't even give his mother prima bhakti because she committed aparadhs. This is in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, the Madhya Khan, chapter 22. All the Vaishnavas would say to Lord Chaitanya, if your mother, your own mother, you're not giving prima bhakti to your own mother, we might as well jump in the Ganges, they said. And so it's described that Advaita Acharya basically inspired Lord Chaitanya's brother and Lord Chaitanya himself to take sannyas. And Mother Sakshi Devi was just criticizing Advaita Acharya privately. But the Lord, as a super soul, he mentioned this. So the Lord has 24-hour surveillance camera. He says, I cannot award my mother prima bhakti unless she, has this love for the Vishnu and the Vaishnava. Don't criticize. So that's kind of my, I would say, what allows Krishna to draw that internal boundary is that, people don't really take seriously. My question is, what are some steps we could take seriously to honor and respect the Vaishnavas privately? Because Krishna has 24-hour surveillance. So if we don't, we won't be able to have those internal boundaries. It's impossible to control the mind, as Arjuna says. Anyways, those are some points. Maybe you could...
I think your point is well taken, that internally, one's mind may be furious. One's mind may be completely unaccepting of another person. One's mind may, have a list of deprecations of another person. So your thought is, you're committing aparadh on the mental level. Well, it's a very interesting thing. I don't know the particular point where it can be found in the Vedas, but it's understood that at this present time, because of this unfortunate age that we're living in, we're not held fully accountable for the terrible stuff that goes on in the mind. It's just such a terrible age. So it's only when one translates what's in the mind into external action, then you are held accountable. So Krishna can still be assisting you, even with the mind going crazy, distressed and deprecating others, or, being furious with others, or, like that. So Krishna is still can assist one, even with the terrible mind doing its thing. if one's not taken it into external action. So the boundary one is always drawing is you keep the mind contained. You don't take it out into external action. And you also understand this is how the mind is programmed to function. You know, it gets very distressed with being dishonored. It gets very distressed with, you know, one's character being questioned. And that's natural. It's natural. Who would not? I mean, if I observe something like that happening to somebody else, I feel distressed to observe something of that nature. And if one's the one experiencing that, of course one would feel distressed. I mean, to be wronged is wronged. One is wrong. There's no two ways about it. But then one has to actually just do the external action in the correct manner, utilizing intelligence. So if the intelligence is, I cannot reason with this entity, just completely avoid. If there's some possibility of reasoning, at least one can draw a boundary of, I prefer to see you only briefly for 5 minutes with many people around. I don't wish to have personal conversation with you. It may be like that you literally have to tell the person, you know, if the person is so out of control. In other circumstances, it may be just that one for oneself draws a boundary and decides that one is only going to, I mean, depending what the situation is, what the complexity is, what the nature of the interaction is, one has to find some way to minimize the friction for oneself, to preserve oneself. So either that involves decreasing the amount of time spent with that person. It may involve directly saying to that person that you wish to decrease the amount of time spent. It may be that one has to think of some clever way, whatever it is that's setting off the disturbance in one's mind. One has to identify it. What is it exactly that's been done that's setting this off in my mind? If you can identify it, then you can address it with intelligence. So you have to identify it, because every one of us, the mind is the representation of all kinds of learned things, and there's a pattern there, and you're going to see it playing itself over and over again. So you have to identify for yourself what is that sensitive area in the mind. If you've identified it's been dishonored in some way, then you have to think how you're going to deal with that dishonor. Because you have a right, as a servitor of Lord Krishna, you have a right to preserve yourself. There's no such thing that anybody's of little value. There's no such thing. Everybody's extremely valuable as a human being, as a servitor of Lord Krishna. So one has to just actually think, how can one actually take something into the realm of external action in the mode of goodness that allows one to preserve oneself and proceed with dignity through life. And if somebody's threatening one's dignity and one's self-esteem, one has to definitely think very carefully how to deal with that entity that's producing that chaos and disturbance in one's life. Some of that chaos and disturbance may be because one has experienced that in the past, or the mind is very sensitive to that. But still, if something externally is constantly triggering that, one has to stop that trigger in some way. Some boundary has to be drawn. So, mode of goodness operation. Yeah. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.